Evening. Tonight's reading is from John chapter 14. I don't know the page in the church Bible, sorry, you'll just have to work it out. John comforts his disciples. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Happy New Year. I was wondering what else I can say to get like a response. Lovely to see you, lovely to be with you. Now, I think all of us have questions about life and faith. And at St. Peter's, one of our values is authenticity. We want to be real and honest and open about the fact that we do have questions, which is why we're starting today this series called I Wonder. We're going to be asking some of these big questions about life and faith. And today we are wondering this question here. Don't all religions lead to the same God? Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Jews, all the faith and religions and philosophies all around the world, aren't we all just talking about the same thing? It's a good question, isn't it? I think so. So just to let you know where we're going to go, we're going to explore that question, the kind of the premise behind it, and then we're going to have a little deeper dive at those words that we read that Jesus said. Does that sound okay? Good. But before we do, I have a theory. Now, I think that everyone in this room can be sorted into one of two categories. It's a dangerous thing to do. I think you are either someone who trusts Google Maps, SatNav, whatever else, or you're someone that doesn't. Put your hand up if you don't. Yeah, a few there. And if you do? Okay, it may or may not be a bit of an age divide. It's probably just a coincidence. Some of you are completely and utterly offended at the suggestion that a machine would have a better idea of where to get to your destination than you do, right? But some of you are maybe like me, and when you're leaving somewhere, maybe you're leaving someone's house, and you're kind of stuck in their porch because they're telling you all the different directions to go, and you're just kind of smiling and nodding. You're not going to do anything that they say. You're just going to get in your car and put it into Google Maps. Is that... Yeah, a few nods, yeah, exactly. I must confess, the other day, we were out with Beth's side of the family, and I felt very smug because my father-in-law went home one way, and we had this awkward kind of eye contact as we were in different lanes. He was going right, I was going left, and I got home about 10 minutes earlier than he did. But that's kind of what we're talking about with this question. Some of us are going different directions. Some of us are following some other directions. Some of us are just following our intuition. But we're all going to the same place. Does it matter how we get there? Does that matter? Well, in order to address this question, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. Here's the elephant. Now, you might have come across this story before. I first heard this when I was at school doing my RE GCSE. It's an old Hindu parable. It tells a story of blind men who were trying to describe an elephant. They had no idea what an elephant was. They had no idea that it was an elephant before them. And they were trying to describe and understand what this elephant was like. So the story goes that one man was holding the elephant's trunk, and so therefore concluded, well, an elephant is like a snake. Another man was holding the elephant's foot and concluded that, well, an elephant is like a tree trunk. Another man was holding the elephant's tusk and concluded that an elephant must be like a spear. The story goes then that, well, if we're all talking about God, well, could it be like this elephant? And just because what I say over here is different to what someone's saying over there, it doesn't mean we're talking about different gods, does it? What if actually we were just a little bit more humble and accepted that maybe we've got it a bit wrong, or maybe we've got it just a little bit right, and actually if we're all nice to one another and said, everyone can be right, then we can all be friends and get on. And I think that's a very kind of noble motivation behind that story. But I think there are some problems with it. And I think it probably exposes some problems with the original question. Don't all religions lead to God? See, firstly, we have this problem of truth. The story of the elephant only works because there's a narrator who can stand back and see that all these men are trying to describe an elephant. There's someone who can say, it's just an elephant. The story begins to fall apart if someone else comes along and says, it's not an elephant, it's a Harley Davidson. Do you see what I mean? It no longer then a story about a perception of what is true, but about what is actually true. And therefore, we have a second problem, the problem of exclusivity. See, truth is, by definition, exclusive. If something is true, then that which opposes it is not true. And I think sometimes we might feel a bit awkward about this. Again, it comes back to this motivation of that story of the elephant. When you want to respect one another. Like, society is kind of coming out of this now, but there was a time where we were talking, weren't we, about post-truth and about kind of even postmodernism and, your truth and my truth. But truth is, by definition, exclusive. We don't need to apologise for that. And I think if we narrow back down to, if we ignore the elephant for a moment, to these world religions, to these faiths, different philosophies, they're all making different truth claims. Christians, for example, one of the key things we believe about God is that he is Trinity. He is God in three persons. Our Muslim friends not only reject that idea, but they're actually quite anti it. Some world religions believe there is no God, and some believe that there are multiple gods. All of these claims can't be true. They're all exclusive claims. It's a bit like if someone came up to you and said, look, I promise you, I've got all of the winning lottery numbers. And then someone else comes along and says, I promise you, I've got all of the winning lottery numbers, and they're different numbers. We can't say, well, that's your truth. You see what I mean? One of them's right, one of them's wrong. Well, they're probably both wrong, unfortunately. You see what I'm getting at? Truth is, by definition, exclusive. And so it sounds humble to suggest that all religions are the same, that all their claims are just as valid, but actually, it doesn't make logical sense, and therefore, it's intellectually offensive, I think. In an attempt to be humble and to say, look, come on, let's all just say that we believe the same thing, we're just simply diluting all the claims everyone else is making. And from my experience, it is far more tolerant, far more respectful to simply say, look, I disagree with the claim that you're making because it's not compatible with mine. So I think the kind of assumption in the question, do all religions lead to God? I think that there are flaws there. It's logically impossible and it's intellectually offensive. It doesn't work. So the answer is no, okay? If you've come for the answer, that's the answer. But there's more layers to it, I think, because the question makes a couple of assumptions. Firstly, that there is a God. And secondly, that this God that there is, it's somehow beneficial to us to get to God, to know God, to understand God, to be led there, to use the language of the question, to find the path there. And that's why I'd like to introduce a third problem. A problem that I think kind of cuts through all that surrounds this and this question and the heart behind it. That's the problem of Jesus. Or rather, more specifically, the uniqueness of Jesus. See, Jesus is fascinatingly unique for so many reasons. One of which being that no historian that is worth listening to, Christian or atheist, no historian would deny the historical reality that 2,000 years ago, this guy Jesus lived, he taught quite radical teachings, gained a following, and started the largest religious movement we've ever seen, that we now call Christianity. Now that's a historical fact. The discussion is whether we believe him or not. Now that's quite unique, but what about what he said? Well, let's get these words back up from John. John simply writing a sort of biography of Jesus' life shortly after Jesus lived. And these are what John tells us. These are the words that John tells us Jesus said. John 14, verse 6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So let's just work our way through that sentence there. What is Jesus saying? Well, firstly, Jesus says, I am the way. Now, in many ways, the first century, the time in which Jesus was speaking these words, was not too dissimilar to our society now. There were so many philosophies and thoughts and faiths and religions all claiming to have a way to God. Now, Jesus knew what he was saying. He knew that it was slightly offensive, slightly pointed. He knew that it was unique to claim to be the way. He's saying that you've been looking for a way to God, whereas actually no one comes to the Father except through me. And actually that is unique in and of itself, that the God that Jesus is talking about is not a big kind of deity in the sky, but is a Father. And Jesus says, you've been looking for a way to God, but that way is me. I am the way. Now, I think that is one of those verses that churchy people like myself can get very familiar with. We love it. You know, we might put it on a plaque on the wall or something. But if you're not really familiar with it, it sounds a bit weird. Now, how can this guy say, I am the way? You know, he might say, that is the way, or this is the way. How can Jesus himself be the way? It's a bit like if I was taking someone out for dinner and they said, you know, Tim, we're going out for dinner. Tim says, what way are we going? And I'm like, this way, like pointing at me. What does that even mean? That's weird. But this is why Jesus is so unique and why he kind of cuts through all of these, the heart behind this question, you know, this pursuit for finding a way to God, finding a path that leads to God. Jesus cuts right through it because he doesn't simply point us in the right direction. He doesn't even take us to the foot of the path and kind of, you know, pat us on the back as he wishes us luck. But Jesus is the way because he is God himself coming to be with us. To find the way to God, we simply need to come to Jesus, who has found us. That is the unique claim of Jesus Christ. To find the way to God, we simply need to come to Jesus, who has found us. Maybe like me, you might have found yourself at some point just asking God to show up, asking God to just show himself. Maybe in a point of desperation. Now I'm experiencing this horrible thing, this journey that I'm on, this life experience is awful. God, would you just show yourself? Show me that this is worth it. Or maybe as a sort of test. God, if you are really who these Christians say that you are, then why don't you just show yourself? Again, the unique claim of Christianity, of Jesus, is that God has shown himself. God has shown up. He stepped into history. He proved himself to be true. A moment in history, a tangible time in history, recorded by eyewitnesses, the ripple effects of which are still kind of in effect today as the church spreads continually across the world. When God walked the earth, Jesus is the way, God coming to us. And Jesus also says, I am the truth. Now, in this journey for truth that the question kind of sets us off on, when truth comes to us, that kind of changes things, doesn't it? It means we've been given the answer. I used to hate it at school in maths. They say, show you're working. I've got the answer. Why do I need to show my working? But that's what it is. Jesus, as the truth, when he comes to us, it's the truth coming right before us. Because the way to God is not a path to find, but it is Jesus Christ who has found us. He is the one who does not merely speak truth. He doesn't just say true things, but is truth. The God who is over all things, all of creation, of all that is true, God has come to us. And therefore, we can know him. God has come to us. Not stood afar, kind of watching us clamber around in the dark, trying to work out what this life is all about. What am I doing? What am I here for? But we sung it at Christmas. He's shone his light into the darkness as Jesus came to be with us. This is my fourth time preaching this sermon today. And after each of the morning services, I heard I heard one story after each service, wonderful testimonies about how people came to know Jesus. After the 9:15, I heard of a man who came to faith at Christmas. He'd been in and out of prison, spent a lot of his life in the wrong sort of crowd, was feeling lost, lacked purpose, lacked hope. Finally was convinced to come to church for a midnight communion on Christmas Eve. And it just made sense. And he gave his life to Jesus during that service. After the 11:15, someone told me a story of a friend of theirs who was a Muslim and had all sorts of questions that were specific to her kind of circumstances at the moment that her kind of expression of faith wasn't able to answer. So similarly, she opened up the Gospels, she read the stories of Jesus, and it just made sense. Jesus shone in the darkness. The truth came to them. And yesterday, I heard another testimony of an atheist academic who was very anti-faith, very anti the Bible, anti-church, all these sorts of things. Finally, again, was convinced by a Christian friend to read the Gospels. And it just made sense. The wisdom that Jesus spoke it made sense of how she feels about the world. The love and the compassion that he demonstrated to others. It made sense of that urge within her to love and to be loved. She said it was like God turned the lights on. The penny dropped. Truth had come. We sung it at Christmas, didn't we? Light and life to all he brings. And Jesus says, I am the life. You know, every single expression of faith or major religion or worldview, philosophy, Christians as well included in this, we all have the same problem to deal with. That the world isn't right. And we kind of know that, don't we? It's not a Christian worldview, that's not me saying that as a vicar. You know, we just know. I feel sad, and that's not right. It doesn't feel like it's meant to be like this. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be joyful. Or there's suffering in the world. You know, I see stuff on the news. It just doesn't sit. That's not as it should be. Surely there's something better than this. And so some people might teach that actually there is good and bad in the universe, and through our actions we need to put more good in than there is bad, and then we might get good in return. Some people would teach that actually there's something so much better to come, and actually that's reserved for the really special people. So do what you can for now, grit your teeth, do what you can, and maybe you'll experience something better. And my atheist friends would say, it is what it is, I'm sorry, but that's just what it is. If you're lucky enough to be dealt a good hand in life, fantastic. Otherwise, do what you can, hope for a lucky break. But actually, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it's the same end for all of us. Death. The world isn't right, and death is the end. I'm sorry, that sounds really morbid, doesn't it? Welcome to church. But again, this is where Jesus and the claims of Christianity are unique. The claims of Jesus as the way and the truth and the life is that the God over all things stepped into creation, didn't point to the way, but the way to God came to us, defeated death and offered us life. See, a God that we can reach is not a God worth reaching. You see what I mean? You know, if we reached him, then where do we go next? But a God that reaches out for us is a God who loves us. A God who made the move because he wants to be with us. He didn't have to. But it's a God of love who wants us. Who wants us and loves us so much so that he declares himself as the way to God. And he loved us to death. Oh, Tim got us looking at this picture of Jesus earlier. You can't quite see it in the evening, can you? As Jesus died on the cross, he put to death all of the bad things in our lives, in our hearts, the things we say and do that distract us, that take us away from the goodness of God. It's what we call sin. And he died on the cross so that we might give him our sin and our brokenness to die with him. And he rose again to new life so that we too might have new life. Life as it was meant to be lived, which is with the giver of life. Purpose today as we know God's Spirit within us, as we read Scripture and we hear his voice, as we meet with his church like we are today at the moment, as we live the lives that God is calling us to. Purpose with Jesus. And hope for tomorrow because we know that death isn't the end. That is the unique claim of Jesus Christ that outshines all else that might demand our attention, that cuts through all that surrounds that question. I said earlier that Jesus was a problem. I'm sure you'll excuse me for slightly provocative language. But it's a problem because it demands something of us. Because maybe Jesus and all of his followers since, maybe they're a little crazy. Or maybe Jesus, this guy in history, was just a bit power hungry and kind of did his thing to get, I don't know, get the recognition that he did. But if there is any inkling within you that these words that Jesus said are true, then we can't just walk away from that. Jesus said he is the way, the truth and the life. The way coming to us, showing us the truth and offering life. But it's an offer that we need to accept. It's a free gift, but we need to take it. So very simply, the question for all of us is, what are you going to do about that? So do all religions lead to God? No, they don't. That's the answer to the question. But the offer of life in all its fullness, the way, Jesus Christ coming to be with us, looking for us, is an offer that is life-changing. And whether you follow Jesus for decades or whether you haven't yet taken that step to follow him, I just wonder if all of us today might stop searching, stop looking, and simply allow ourselves to be found. Amen.